Welcome to Superhero Pow. I'm your host nerd, Tom Fremgen. Darkseid, arguably DC Comics' greatest supervillain. And isn't it a shame that barely anyone really understands him? He's just a big evil dude that has atomic farts, apparently. Look at that. Though oddly enough, it took a long while for anyone at DC to realize Darkseid's potential as a grand master villain. Created in 1970 by Jack Kirby, as the god that Satan himself would worship, Darkseid stayed mostly in the pages of the Fourth World comics. Though Robert Kanigher used him twice in the pages of Lois Lane, and E. Nelson Bridwell used him once in Jimmy Olsen, mainly as a background villain for the evil Morgan Edge clone. But when Kirby left DC in 1973, that was it for Darkseid. That is until 1976, when writer Jerry Conway helped bring back the New Gods comic and used him in the new series, The Secret Society of Supervillains. But it wasn't until 1980 before Darkseid really faced off against the DC superheroes in Justice League of America number 183, 184, and 185, again written by Jerry Conway. Then in 1982, Paul Levitz brought him into the Legion of Superheroes and really put Darkseid on the map with the Great Darkness Saga. Pretty much since then, Darkseid has become a mainstay villain at DC. But again, as a character that gets so much use these days, it's bizarre how misunderstood and disrespected he is. When in the Superpowers comic, he gets depowered by Mr. Freeze and then gets mugged. Are you fucking kidding me? More recently, in the Darkseid War, he gets turned into a mother-loving baby. Has everyone at DC lost their fucking minds? How are we supposed to fear a villain that just got turned into a baby? So now I guess it's up to me to explain a few things about Darkseid. For the most part, I'm talking about the writings of Jack Kirby. I'll borrow from a few other writers where it makes sense, but when other writers go off the rails and say things like, Darkseid banged an Amazon, had a daughter named Grail who was born with omega beams. No. It doesn't work like that. First off, Darkseid is a god. That's little g, like Zeus and Odin in comic books. For all intended purposes, he's immortal, has an immensely powerful body, and a mind capable of dealing with concepts beyond human ability. But not just a god, a new god. So what the heck does that mean? Well, Darkseid and company were this close to being Marvel Comics characters. Imagine a world with no Darkseid for Superman to fight and no Thanos for the Avengers to fight. Because Jack Kirby began creating the new gods as he was working on Thor for Marvel. In the Thor comic backup feature, Tales of Asgard, Kirby, with Lee scripting, was telling the full story of Asgard. And in the Runes of Ragnarok, Kirby had the idea of new gods growing out of the dead Asgardians, so to speak, into two warring planets. It took 4 years and leaving Marvel until he was ready and allowed to tell the tale. Since DC was more into Greek mythology than Norse, the Asgardian connection was played down. But that's why Darkseid and company are called the New Gods. Now let's get into who Darkseid is. Born into the royal family of Apokolips, ruled by Queen Hegra, Apokolips is a bleak, warlike world constantly in conflict with New Genesis, home of the more peaceful and enlightened gods, if you will. At this point, some writers refer to Darkseid as Prince Yuza. So use that name if you wish, but it matters not. The important part is Darkseid was known to be a great thinker and not interested in fighting or power at this point. Was he secretly coveting his mother's throne? Perhaps, but it's unclear. But against his mother's wishes, he married a scientist sorceress named Suli. It's said that Darkseid loved her, as much as an Apocalyptian can, and had his son Kalibak with her. Upon learning of the marriage, Queen Hegra killed Suli and forced Darkseid to marry Tigra, who would give birth to Orion. This is when Darkseid makes his move for the throne of Apokolips. First, he tricks his main rival to the throne, his uncle Steppenwolf, into restarting the war with New Genesis, by getting him to kill the wife of Isaiah, the man who would become Highfather. Isaiah then quickly kills Steppenwolf. Next, Darkseid would set about activating his god power. As it's been shown over the years, starting with Isaiah becoming Highfather, most new gods are not born with superpowers. They would be gained later. And Darkseid set his sights on the Omega effect. Other writers have said Darkseid set up his brother Drax to fail at getting the Omega effect so he could, which is fine, take it or leave it. But after acquiring the Omega effect, Darkseid then turned his attention to his mother, the Queen. She had Desaad poison Darkseid's wife Suli, so Darkseid forced Desaad in turn to poison his mother, allowing Darkseid to become the supreme ruler of Apokolips, with Desaad as his somewhat loyal toady. With the need for the war with New Genesis over, Darkseid trades sons with Highfather, Orion for scot-free, the future Mr. Miracle, putting an end to the war. Darkseid also imprisoned his wife Tigra from that moment on. At this point, let's stop and examine Darkseid's motivation. Most writers would have Darkseid as some generic evil villain, out to conquer the universe simply because. But I think it's much clearer that Darkseid felt a serious lack of control in his life, not being allowed to marry the one he wished. So he took control, and further still is hell-bent on controlling everything. Perhaps because he fears it might one day be a threat to him, or maybe just because it makes him feel more comfortable. But that is Darkseid's motivation and the reason behind his actions. This brings us to our next point, his powers. First, I'll jump to his ultimate goal, the anti-life equation. For years, no writer knew what the heck this was. In the Cosmic Odyssey miniseries, it was revealed to be an entity from another dimension. No. You see, the anti-life equation is a conceptual formula. When focused on another living being, it completely robs them of their self-worth. So they no longer have a reason or a will to live, nor do they have the will to end their lives. In Kirby terms, they are in a state of anti-life, alive but not truly living. And then the being using the equation against them becomes their sole reason to be. And doesn't that just fit perfectly with Darkseid's motivations? It will give him what he craves more than life itself. And the equation is a fact of nature, like velocity or time. Most people who discover it aren't even aware that they've done so. To a mere mortal, the equation could perhaps give them control over a few dozen people. To a new god like Darkseid, he could gain control over a few million, perhaps even a billion. Finally, let's talk about the Omega effect, probably the most misunderstood aspect of Darkseid, as more often than not, it's used as an omni-power that can do anything a writer wants at the moment. But thinking about what it does, and what it's named, and how, just like the old gods of thunder and the sun, it's pretty clear that the Omega effect is entropy, in the sense of eventual decay and death, not so much the random disorder, but still related to it. So in a sense, Darkseid has the power of death, but actually more than that. As it's been stated, the Omega effect doesn't just kill someone, it removes them from existence and basically returns them, or anything it blasts, back to the source, the power source of the universe, or God, Big G. This is why the Omega effect is so powerful. It's not just another laser beam. It basically erodes the core of your being. And as the master of entropy, Darkseid can reverse the process and bring people back from the source, or send them through time and space. This is why there is no defense against the Omega effect. Sci-fi shields, armor, nothing can stop decay, which Darkseid can use to varying degrees, from simply hurting you to totally wiping you out. Though using the total wipeout level always drains Darkseid, which is why he usually never uses it, because it would leave him vulnerable. One final aspect of the Omega effect is the Omega beams themselves. They shoot forth from Darkseid's eyes and never stop until they hit their target. There's never been a good explanation why, but again, seeing how it functions, it seems clear they are an extension of his eyesight, as he is actively seeking out his target for destruction, which is why they are still connected to his eyes, opposed to being programmed or like heat-seeking. As for zipping around like crazy, you could say that's just Darkseid trying to scare everyone, or just comic book sizzle. But there you go. In a nutshell, scared by his lack of control as a young god, Darkseid has made it his mission to control everything around him. First with fear, as the master of life and death with the Omega effect, and eventually with the anti-life equation, removing the will of his enemies. In closing, yes, you can find examples contradicting my analysis. To that, I refer you to the start of the video. I'm focusing mainly on Kirby's works, the guy who created Darkseid, and not every single comic book Darkseid appeared in. So I maintain firmly, this is Darkseid. His motivations, his powers, period. Anyway, that's it for me. Thanks so much for spending time with me, and be sure to let me know your thoughts below. And if you could find it in your hearts to like and subscribe, I won't have to cut it out and sell it on eBay. Wait, what the hell am I talking about?